Hello, welcome to LangWatch Optimization Studio tutorial series. In this series, we're going to go over the basics of the Optimization Studio. And we're going to start with the most basic construction block, which is the LLM node. So let's get started. To create a new workflow, you can just come to the workflows page and create a new one. Let's choose blank template as a simple example. Let's name it classify transactions because I have a data set that will fit just right in. Then as I click create workflow, we already get these three basic blocks: an entry node, an LLM call, and then an end node. This is where your data is coming in, and this is where it's going out. So if you go to the LLM call, this is really what it sounds like. It's just calling an LLM. And on the right sidebar, you can see all the properties of it. The LLM being used, the instructions to it, inputs and outputs, and demonstrations. Those are some examples that we can give the LLM. To start things simple, we can execute just this node by clicking here and choosing the option Run with Manual Input. It is going to ask for us to input a question like, hello, how are you? You then click on execute. Your inputs are always on this side and your outputs are always on that side. As you saw, I gave an answer. Hello, I'm just a program, so I don't have feelings. Classic GPT-4o mini answer. And you can see how much it cost and the duration of it. Okay, that was simple enough. We gave it absolutely no instructions, of course. But what I want to do is using this LLM to classify my personal transactions. So one thing I can do is actually change how those inputs are named. One thing important to note is that the name of the inputs and outputs, they go to the LLM. So the LLM actually reads those names, so they're pretty meaningful. So by changing it to something like purchase here and then category there, even without adding any prompts, if I say something like Amazon, you see that the LLM is going to try to make the best of it, and it categorized as online retail. And I want to do that because this is exactly how my data set look like. Let me show you. By going really quick on the entry node, we'll have another video focusing on that, but let me just choose my data set of personal transactions. This data set contains information about some personal transactions, like the description, the amount, and the category. What I'm trying to predict here is the category, and I can use the description, for example, for my purchase field. So when I select the data set and I hit OK, I can, for example, connect my description field to my purchase field, which I just created on my LLM call. So then, instead of running with manual input, I can click run workflow until here. What this is going to do is pick up a random example from my dataset and execute with it. Let's see. So it took mortgage payment and it categorized as housing. However, housing might not be one of the categories I want. So that's where instructions come in. If you look at the categories, we have something like shopping, mortgage and rent, and restaurants. And this is something you can describe to your LLM here. Classify my transactions in one of mortgage and rent, shopping, etc. Anyway, I'm not giving very good instructions right now, and that's okay because we can find better prompts automatically later. But just to give you an example, by giving it instructions, you can guide the LLM better on your direction. One other thing that I want to show here though is that you can actually add more fields on inputs and outputs for the LLM. So let's say we want to use not only the input to help the LLM produce this category, but also the amount field so it can use to try to predict. By adding an amount input, you can see that it also pops up immediately here on the node, allowing me to connect from the dataset. And then if I execute it, both information will be passed, hopefully helping the LLM to get to the right answer. Next, I can add another output field. For example, let's say I want the LLM to predict the background story of this transaction. Let's see what it does with that. There we go. So GPT-4o came up with a pretty interesting story there, also using the amount and the purchase they were given as input. Another thing you can do though is connect multiple LLM calls together. So let's say I want to use the background story to try to help another LLM to try to come up with the input. So I have GPT-4o mini generate the background story, and then I'm going to pull up another LLM signature node here, which I'm going to again add the purchase and the amount, but I'm also going to add the background story now. And as output, I want the category. I'm going to remove the category from over here, and then I'm just going to plug it in my description again to this node, the amount, and I'm going to use the background story that came from the other node. This one, I'm going to call it story generation, and here I'm going to call transaction classification. And this category is going to be my final result. Then I'm going to use this also to show you how can you switch LLMs. From here, I can choose GPT-4o instead of 4o mini. I want a smarter LLM to classify this category. I am going to copy these instructions over to this other one. And then for my story generation one, I'm going to set the temperature to 1 because I want it to be more creative. Since you're not using the same LLM everywhere, then you can see on this node that this one is using GPT-4o mini and this one is using GPT-4o. By clicking here, we can run the whole workflow until this very node. Everything got executed, and then as a result, we got business investment for the brewing company. That's a nice excuse for beer, isn't it? Anyway, another thing I wanted to show to you is that every node is captured on the full trace. So to see the full execution that just happened, you can click this button, and then LangWatch Trace Monitoring is going to pop up. By scrolling down here, you can see that your workflow started, and then the story generation module kicked in, eventually calling GPT-4o mini, and then later calling GPT-4o. By looking at the input field, you can see the full messages list that was used. There was a system prompt with all the fields that you requested, plus your instructions prompt, and the inputs as a user request. The LLM then generated business investment as a category. You might have noticed this formatting titles here. This is the DSPy standard template. By separating the fields this way and having them split over here, this makes it possible and very easy to find better instructions and better inputs and optimize everything, as we're going to show on the next videos. Last but not least, I want to show you that you can also give some demonstrations to the LLM. So for example, let's take this backstory and let's categorize it as beer to teach the LLM that this is actually the expected category here. When I hit save and I run it again, I get beer as a result, as it learned from example. Cool. Lastly, I want to show you that you can use your own LLMs, even your private trained one, by clicking this button, Configure Available Model. This will take you to LangWatch Settings panel, where you can enable custom settings and put your own API keys, your own fine-tuned models, or even your custom models. For example, if you have your own trained llama running somewhere. Everything that is OpenAI compatible should be supported, and then they will show up back here where you can choose them for execution. That's it. We're barely scratching the surface. We haven't got into prompting techniques yet, or processing images, or the most exciting of it all, evaluating the performance and optimizing automatically. But this should be already enough for you to start setting up your workflow and testing it out with some LLMs. See you next video.